When this boy steps into a duel against the top prodigy of a powerful family, everyone expects him to get crushed. But instead, he completely humiliates her. She unleashes her strongest techniques one after another, yet Leo dodges everything like she's moving in slow motion. Then, with just one strike, he sends her flying across the arena. Shocked, she can't understand how some random boy beat her so easily. But Leo calmly removes one of the weight bracelets he had been wearing the entire fight and tosses it to her. The moment she catches it, her arms give out. Even using both hands, she can barely hold it. That's when she realizes the truth. Leo was fighting her while carrying that insane weight the whole time. Because he's not an ordinary boy. He's a legendary hero reincarnated after 5,000 years. Wisps of white clouds drift across a vibrant, clear blue sky as the morning light spills over the horizon. Below, the massive stone facade of a prestigious academy comes into view, featuring high arched windows and sprawling greenery that surrounds the academic halls. Inside one of the grand lecture rooms, the atmosphere is quiet and studious. An instructor dressed in a sleek black turtleneck leans his hands against a wooden podium, facing a room of seated students who are preparing to begin their daily lessons on the foundational history of their world. An ornate stone pillar engraved with ancient patterns and crown-like motifs glows with a faint, ethereal light. The blonde instructor turns to the class with a beaming smile, declaring that it has exactly been 5,000 years since the hero record first appeared in the world. He stands in front of a chalkboard filled with complex diagrams and written notes detailing various magical transformations and historical data. As he continues his lecture, he becomes visibly moved by the subject matter, placing a hand over his heart to emphasize his sincerity. His face flushes with a deep red hue as he becomes overwhelmed with excitement, clenching his fist tightly in front of his face. He loudly proclaims his absolute certainty that the future heroes of the continent are currently sitting right among the student body in this very room. A heavy thud resonates through the silent hall as the instructor's passionate demeanor suddenly shifts into an expression of stern authority. He warns the class that they must listen carefully to every word if they want to understand the true nature of the records. His gaze falls upon Leo Plav, who is slumped over his wooden desk with his white hair messy and his head down, completely ignoring the lecture. The instructor's voice booms as he shouts Leo's name, forcing the boy to snap out of his lethargy. To test his knowledge, the teacher poses a difficult question regarding what specific rituals were performed 5,000 years ago so that an individual could be officially called a hero. Leo slowly shifts his weight, placing his hand firmly on the edge of the desk as he prepares to answer. He looks toward the front of the room with an expression of utter indifference and begins to speak, starting his explanation by stating that, roughly speaking, the process was quite different. Leo Plav stands confidently in his academy uniform as an identification panel labels him as a 15-year-old from the Plav family. In the classroom, a student with messy orange hair raises his hand high, cutting through the silence of the lecture. While Leo remains standing with a calm, analytical gaze, the other boy prepares to demonstrate his knowledge of ancient history. This student intends to answer the professor's prompt regarding the nature of hero selection from 5 millennia ago, asserting his presence in the room. A golden-hued vision of the past appears, showing a shadowed hero kneeling during a divine ceremony. The orange-haired student explains that in the ancient era, heroes were chosen through sacred rituals. He specifically cites the blood ritual as a primary example of how these legendary figures were officially established. Leo watches the boy's performance with a stoic face, his sharp red eyes revealing nothing of his true nature as the reincarnation of the very legends currently being discussed by his peers. The professor exclaims "excellent" in a massive speech bubble, his praise echoing through the grand, sunlit classroom. He identifies the answering student as Gulliver Traden, calling him the greatest magic prodigy of the kingdom. An official graphic appears on screen to introduce Gulliver as a prominent member of the prestigious Traden family. The classroom atmosphere shifts as the focus remains entirely on Gulliver's academic brilliance, leaving Leo standing silently at his desk while the other students look on in absolute awe. Leo looks down at his desk, his white hair catching the light as a dark thought bubble emerges from his mind. He reflects on the fact that 5,000 years ago, meeting the gods was a simple and common occurrence. He finds the modern academic term, sacred rituals, to be a gross, almost humorous simplification of the reality he personally experienced in his past life. In his mind, these ceremonies were far more direct and visceral than the sanitized versions found in current history books. Flashes of the ancient world show gods gifting a miracle to the lower realm, with a green-clad elf reaching out toward a blinding light. This divine intervention created what is now known as the hero record, a fundamental piece of lost history that changed the world. Back in the present, Leo stands amidst the rows of desks with a slightly bewildered expression. He looks toward the front of the room and wonders why, despite his lineage and the power he holds, the people in this room continue to treat him as if he is completely invisible. A white parchment reveals a special note confirming the reincarnation of the great hero, Kyle. Outside a glass partition, a frantic crowd of students presses their faces against the window, shouting and asking where the person of interest is. Inside the classroom, Leo sits quietly at his desk, seemingly detached from the commotion. Nearby, the grand hall of the academy is bathed in light as a distinguished man and woman from the Zerdinger family make their entrance. They are flanked by armed guards and a banner bearer, drawing gasps of admiration and loud cheers of "amazing" from the gathered students. A loudspeaker echoes throughout the school halls, ordering all students to gather in the auditorium without exception for the Zerdinger family visit. While the rest of the school scrambles to attend, Leo remains in a dimly lit room, his white hair glowing against the dark wood. A red-haired classmate approaches him with a smirk, asking if Leo plans to try and impress the prestigious visitors. Leo doesn't hesitate, staring back with flat, crimson eyes and a look of pure indifference. He bluntly states that he is going home, completely uninterested in the social spectacle. Leo stands up and walks toward the exit with his hands shoved casually into his pockets. He ignores the rules of the academy and the importance of the guests, leaving his peer frozen in a state of utter disbelief. The red-haired student's face contorts in shock, his jaw dropping as he watches Leo's back. He erupts into a panicked shout, screaming, "Really?" as Leo continues to distance himself from the auditorium, choosing his own path over the mandatory assembly. A sharp, blue impact effect streaks across the screen as a training weapon is struck with high velocity. Leo stands in the center of a spacious, sun-drenched dojo, gripping a practice blade while another lies discarded several feet away on the wooden floor. He is dressed in dark training gear, his expression focused and his breath steady despite the exertion. He adjusts his black fingerless gloves, reflecting on how his consistent physical training has significantly aided his development. As he stands alone in the center of the room, the sound of footsteps approaches from the shadows. A voice breaks the silence, asking Leo what he could possibly be thinking about so deeply. A female sparring partner with long dark hair leaps through the air, bringing her blade down in a powerful vertical strike. Leo reacts instantly, raising his sword to intercept the blow as sparks fly from the heavy impact of metal against metal. The force of the collision echoes through the training grounds while the sun begins to set over the distant horizon. The woman lands gracefully from her jump, maintaining her combat stance as the two warriors face off in the center of the courtyard, the dust settling around their feet. The woman's eyes narrow with intensity as she presses her blade against Leo's, her face positioned inches away from his. She warns him directly that he cannot hope to make it to the Lumern Academy with such mediocre talent, openly challenging his current level of skill. In response to the provocation, a hand grips the ornate hilt of a sword with renewed strength. The leather of the handle creaks under the intense pressure of the tightening hold as Leo prepares to push back against the critique. The two engage in a rapid exchange of strikes, their movements blurring into a sequence of high-speed clashes and redirects. As they lock swords once more, the woman maintains a confident smirk, asking Leo if she should start going a bit harder on him. Sweat begins to bead on Leo's forehead as he struggles against the overwhelming physical pressure of her relentless assault. His breathing becomes shallow and labored under the strain of keeping up with her superior pace. A massive, circular arc of light erupts from a powerful swing, cutting through the air with explosive force. The ground beneath them trembles as the violent impact creates a shockwave that sends debris flying across the training area. A sharp, heavy sound resonates through the courtyard as the sheer momentum of the clash forces a decisive break in the rhythm of the battle, pushing both combatants to their limits. Leo gasps for air, his face drenched in sweat as he looks toward the figure before him and addresses her as mother. He shouts out in a moment of desperate confusion, demanding to know what she is talking about as the emotional intensity of the session peaks. Suddenly, the perspective shifts as a strike forces a loss of balance. As the momentum of the fight turns completely against him, Leo can only think to himself, "Oh no," while the blade closes the distance. Leo stares upward as a massive blade descends toward his face with lethal intent. A blinding explosion of red energy and white light tears through the air as the strike connects with the ground. The force of the impact sends heavy shockwaves across the training area, momentarily obscuring both combatants in a thick haze of raw, destructive power. The dark-haired woman stares back with wide, red eyes, struggling to catch her breath as the duel reaches its sudden and violent conclusion. Leo's white hair is disheveled as he stares back with a piercing gaze, unfazed by the exchange. A sharp metallic ring echoes through the garden as the long blade is manipulated with expert precision, catching the sunlight in a lethal, silver flash. A close-up of a trembling red eye reveals the internal shock and panic of the defeated opponent. Leo looks down and asks if his mother is okay, his voice remaining remarkably steady despite the intensity of the lethal exchange. The Marchioness is shown sitting slumped on the stone floor, her own sword discarded several feet away, having been completely disarmed by her son's superior speed and technique. Leo stands tall over his mother, the tip of his practice sword resting just inches away from her throat in a gesture of total victory. She calls out his name in a breathy whisper of disbelief, her body frozen as she realizes the terrifying gap in their combat abilities. He remains silent and motionless, his expression cold and detached, as he looks down at the defeated matriarch of the Plav family. A magnificent, multi-spired academy looms over the landscape, its white walls and golden accents glowing with historical prestige and magical power. This is revealed to be one of the 4 hero academies that holds the secret hero records of the different races. Leo stands before a massive, glowing entrance, thinking to himself that this institution is the most likely place where the records of his past life as Kyle still remain hidden. Back in the courtyard, the perspective shifts to Leo's shoulder as he acknowledges his mother's plans with a simple, firm statement of course. The Marchioness then reveals the shocking news that the prestigious Zerdinger family is planning an official visit to their house. Leo repeats the name with a questioning tone, prompting his mother to confirm that the legendary Marshall family is indeed coming to meet with them personally. Marchioness Plav looks on with a bright, scheming smile as she outlines her plan for her son's future. She declares with absolute certainty that she will ask the visiting nobles to permit Leo to inherit the Zerdinger family's legendary aura technique. A smaller, stylized Leo stands beside her, repeating the name of the technique as if weighing the value of such a gift, while his mother continues to beam with pride and affection. The atmosphere shifts as Leo's expression sharpens into a focused, knowing smirk. He looks directly ahead, his eyes filled with a quiet intensity as he confirms his intention to enter the academy within the current year. The perspective shifts to the exterior of a magnificent, sun-drenched estate featuring multiple spires and classic architecture. Below, the expansive courtyard is meticulously maintained, centered around a large, ornate stone fountain that reflects the bright sky. A massive formation of royal guards and knights in silver armor stands in perfect rows, creating a corridor of steel for the arriving guests. Near the center of the plaza, a majestic winged beast stands beside the lead soldiers, signaling the immense status of the approaching party as they prepare for the official commencement of the meeting. A heavy, black lacquered carriage accented with intricate gold filigree rolls through the estate grounds. Inside, a voice rings out with clear disdain, questioning why their uncle is bothering to rely on a place of this nature. As the carriage door opens, a polished black boot steps onto the stone path, belonging to a girl who suggests that renting an entire hotel would have been a more suitable arrangement. This is Celia Zerdinger, a 15-year-old genius known as the Sword Maiden of her family. She looks away with an irritated gaze, complaining that she would much rather spend her time focusing on the Lumran entrance exam than participating in this visit. A man's voice cuts through Celia's complaining, firmly calling her by name to silence her. He reminds her of the young man they are here to see, the one who famously stated he had absolutely no interest in joining or even associating with the Zerdinger family. The man speaking is G.I. Zerdinger, the formidable vice-lord of the Zerdinger clan, whose presence is signaled by his impeccably tailored dark suit and high-collared cravat. He stands with an air of cold authority, his focus entirely on the upcoming confrontation with the boy who dared to snub their lineage. Celia responds with a smug, condescending tilt of her head, her eyes filled with arrogance. She scoffs at the idea of the boy being special, stating that he likely isn't much to look at and doesn't deserve their attention. She adjusts her dark gloves and brushes off the importance of the encounter with an air of effortless superiority. The camera pans away toward the lush orange and yellow leaves of the surrounding trees, capturing the quiet calm of the estate just moments before the two powerful families finally come face to face. A wide shot captures a grand, high-ceilinged hallway where a deep red carpet stretches toward a meeting of two powerful factions. A man in a formal dark suit bows his head in a gesture of profound respect, declaring that it is a distinct honor to finally meet Marchioness Plav. Standing prominently in the center of the frame is a woman with long, flowing dark hair and a man dressed in a sophisticated brown three-piece suit and green tie. On-screen text boxes formally identify the couple. Reina Plav is introduced as the lady of the Plav family, while the man beside her is Dade Plav, the official head of the Plav family. Dade gestures with an open hand, his expression calm and welcoming as he reinforces his status as the Marquis Plav to the assembled guests. The camera focuses on a young woman standing with military precision, wearing a stark white uniform accented with gold tassels, a black belt, and dark leather gloves. She keeps her eyes closed in a moment of silent protocol, pressing her right hand firmly against her chest to signal her loyalty and respect for the household. Her long black hair contrasts sharply against the white fabric of her high-collared tunic as she maintains a perfect, rigid posture. The scene cuts to an intense close-up of her face as she snaps her eyes open, revealing a pair of glowing, crimson irises that radiate power. She speaks with a clear, unwavering voice, informing the Plav family that she will be remaining in their care and under their roof for the duration of 1 week. Reina Plav looks down at the young girl, her expression unreadable as she extends a hand in greeting. She remarks that the girl possesses a very familiar appearance, noting that she strongly resembles both her father and her uncle. As the conversation continues, the background hums with the movement of various attendants and maids. A tight internal perspective shows Reina focusing intently on the girl's specific features, her jet black hair and those piercing red eyes. Reina's thoughts race as she questions if this girl is the one the family has been waiting for. Suddenly, a shimmering, light-filled aura begins to emanate from Reina's lower torso, signifying a surge of internal energy. A final, blunt revelation confirms the secret of their lineage through a dark text overlay, stating clearly that the girl is actually Leo's aunt. Maids in traditional black and white uniforms move through the sun-drenched estate, pushing a heavy wooden cart filled with tea supplies and a bowl of pristine white sugar cubes. The scene transitions to an overhead view of a private drawing room where Dade and Reina are seated at a white marble table for a formal tea service. Large windows allow bright sunlight to pour across the floor as Dade holds a delicate teacup, his brow furrowed with a hint of concern. He informs Reina of a report he received regarding their son, stating that Leo claimed he had absolutely no interest in meeting the visitors and decided to go home early instead. Reina reacts with a light, graceful laugh, lifting a hand to cover her mouth in a display of noble etiquette. She smiles brightly at her husband, offering a polite apology on behalf of her son's blunt and dismissive behavior. A hand carefully sets a steaming cup of tea onto a delicate white saucer, the liquid rippling slightly from the movement. As the steam drifts upward, the conversation turns toward the nature of the young heir, questioning exactly what kind of child Leo has become. Reina stands firm, her elegant posture and noble attire visible as she speaks with absolute conviction. She clarifies that Leo doesn't just have potential, but that he truly possesses an unbelievable level of talent that defies standard logic. The Marquis watches her closely, his brow furrowed with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity as he asks if she really believes Leo is as exceptional as she claims. A flashback of intense combat erupts, showing Leo and his female sparring partner locked in a fierce exchange of blows. Their blades meet with explosive force, sending orange sparks flying across the training grounds as they move at blinding speeds. Reina's voice carries over the memory, insisting that her assessment of the boy isn't biased by her role as his mother, but is based on his objective prowess. Hearing this, the Marquis breaks into a wide, toothy grin, his eyes closing as he laughs and admits that her high praise has piqued his interest. His demeanor shifts instantly as his eyes snap open, glowing with a predatory orange light. He states with cold authority that he will need to personally test the boy's potential to see this power for himself. The female sparring partner is shown mid-swing, her face twisted in a mask of concentration and strain as she tries to keep up with the overwhelming pressure. Her white combat uniform flutters in the wind of the exchange, her eyes wide as she realizes the gap in their abilities. The scene transitions through a series of dark, jagged visual markers and symbolic emblems that represent the weight of the power being displayed. The atmosphere in the training hall becomes heavy, signaling a profound shift in Leo's development as he moves beyond standard instruction. Deep within the quiet training hall, Leo remains seated in a meditative posture, his eyes closed as he focuses his internal energy. His wooden sword sits silently on the polished floor, no longer needed for this stage of his refinement. A brilliant blue aura begins to leak from his body, concentrating around his gloved hands as he masters the flow of his power. He suddenly snaps his eyes open, their red hue burning with a newfound intensity that illuminates the dim room. Wisps of blue energy spiral around him like a cyclone as he exhales a steady breath, stabilizing the massive pressure. The transformation is finished, and a declaration appears confirming that the vessel to contain everything has finally been completed. The stage is now set for the legendary hero to begin his journey as an Academy honor student. A dark silhouette stands centered within a violent storm of radiant blue energy that pulses with immense pressure. Leo reveals the calculated reason behind his decision to delay his aura training until this specific point in his life. He explains that the moment an individual accepts aura, they effectively forfeit the chance to further accumulate mana and spiritual power within their vessel. The scene transitions to a scorched, apocalyptic horizon where a pair of terrifying red eyes glares from the darkness above a sea of jagged black peaks. This strategic delay was necessary to ensure his capacity for power reached its absolute maximum before he locked in his progression. The imagery shifts to a haunting memory of a desolate battlefield where the bodies of fallen comrades lie broken on the cold ground. Leo gazes at the remains of a silver-haired warrior and a young woman, their swords shattered beside them in the dirt. He reflects on his past life as Kyle, realizing that a greater mastery over the essence of power might have prevented this tragedy. A tall, cloaked figure stands amidst the smoke while a monstrous, red-taloned hand reaches out from the shadows behind them. Determined to never repeat his failures, Leo vows to master every discipline completely in this life, starting immediately with the total control of aura. A speech bubble pierces the silence of the bright hallway, drawing Leo out of his deep contemplation. A voice asks for confirmation of his identity, questioning if he is truly the son of the Plav family. Leo looks up, his white hair catching the light as a girl with long, flowing dark hair stands before him in a pristine white and gold academy uniform. She carries herself with an aura of authority as she approaches, her footsteps echoing through the ornate corridor. She looks down at him with a pair of sharp red eyes and a confident smirk, remarking that from what she can see, his physical basics and foundation appear remarkably solid. Leo maintains a steady, unwavering gaze as the girl explains that her involvement with him will likely gain her favor and points with his aunt. Unfazed by her presence or her comments, Leo demands to know her identity with a direct and blunt question. The girl identifies herself as Celia Zerdinger, her voice carrying the weight of a prestigious bloodline. A close-up focuses on her mouth as she lets out a soft, thoughtful hum while maintaining her playful smile. Leo remains skeptical of the encounter, responding with a short, dismissive query that challenges her sudden appearance and the overwhelming confidence she displays toward his future training. Leo stares forward with a gaze of absolute certainty, dismissing the offer of instruction by stating he has no intention of being taught by anyone weaker than himself. In the corner of the frame, a young girl with dark hair and striking red eyes is shown in a state of utter disbelief, her mouth hanging open at the sheer audacity of his claim. The perspective shifts to a wide view of the grand training grounds where the air remains heavy with tension. A voice echoes through the hall, acknowledging that while Leo might be stronger in a desperate fight for survival, a duel of pure, refined swordsmanship is an entirely different matter. On the floor, the elongated shadow of a warrior holding a sword looms, signaling the transition from words to physical conflict. The camera zooms in on Celia's face as her crimson eye narrows into a sharp, piercing glare directed straight at the protagonist. She steps forward with purpose, her white and gold military-style academy uniform standing out against the dim interior as an orange energy effect slashes through the frame. Now standing tall and fully composed, she levels her thin, elegant blade toward Leo, issuing a formal challenge to duel if he truly feels that confident in his abilities. A confident, almost condescending smile plays on her lips as she vows to show him the wall of reality, a gap in skill she believes he cannot possibly bridge. Her expression radiates the pride of a high-born martial artist who has never known defeat. Leo's lower face is shown in a tight close-up, revealing a calm and amused smile that mirrors the girl's confidence as he asks what will happen if he emerges as the victor. He shifts his weight and tightens his fingers around the handle of a heavy wooden training sword, the wood grain visible as he prepares for the exchange. Celia's eyes flare with an intense, predatory light, her focus narrowing entirely on Leo's movements as the atmosphere around them sharpens. Leo wastes no more time on words, declaring that they should start the match right away. He lunges forward with explosive power, swinging the wooden blade in a wide, horizontal arc that leaves a shimmering blue trail of aura behind it, cutting through the air with a deafening whistle as the fight begins. A sharp metallic clang echoes as a practice blade slices through the air with lethal precision, marking the start of a high-stakes exchange. Celia Zerdinger plants her feet firmly against the floor, her long black hair whipping behind her as she narrows her red eyes in a display of fierce defiance. She stares directly at her opponent, declaring that his current effort alone simply isn't enough to bridge the massive gap in their status. Suddenly, Leo Plov lunges forward, his body becoming a streak of violet and black motion as he sprints across the arena. He moves with a raw, explosive speed that catches the onlookers off guard, leaving no room for a counterattack as he closes the distance in an instant. The two combatants collide in a violent explosion of blue sparks and white light as their blades lock together in a brutal test of strength. Leo's physical power is immediately overwhelming, forcing Celia to strain every muscle in her arms just to keep her sword from being crushed against her own chest. She gasps in total disbelief, her mind racing as she questions where this level of monstrous power could possibly be coming from an Amir student. Without saying a word or changing his stoic expression, Leo doubles down on his assault, his spiky white hair shadowing his eyes as he exerts even more downward pressure. The heavy sound of shifting weight fills the air, signaling the absolute physical dominance he holds over the supposed genius of the Zerdinger family. Sweat beads on Celia's forehead as the terrifying realization sets in that her defense is crumbling under the sheer weight of Leo's strikes. Her eyes widen in genuine terror, and she admits that she is physically unable to block the incoming onslaught of his wooden blade. Leo's sword descends once more like a massive hammer, striking with such intensity that the impact creates a blinding crater of light around them. A massive shockwave of translucent energy erupts from the point of contact, blowing back dust and debris while forcing the spectators to shield their eyes. Those watching from the sidelines are left in shock, questioning if Leo has activated an advanced technique like aura armor during what was supposed to be a duel of pure swordsmanship. Crackling veins of red lightning surge around Celia's body as she desperately attempts to stabilize her mana and reclaim the advantage in the fight. She grinds her teeth in frustration, insisting to herself that it doesn't matter what tricks he uses because she is destined to win. However, her confidence is instantly replaced by a panicked scream of, "What?" as she witnesses the phenomenon occurring on Leo's own body. Leo stands perfectly calm, his gloved hands firmly gripping the hilt of his wooden sword as a terrifyingly dense and heavy aura begins to manifest around his forearms. He stares her down with a cold, dismissive gaze, informing her that the difference in their power is as vast as the distance between heaven and earth. He then poses a final, chilling question, asking if she is truly ready to test that gap. A heavy black metal band hits the stone floor with a resounding thud, cracking the pavement beneath it. It is a weight magic bracelet, a high-level training tool designed to suppress a warrior's physical attributes through immense artificial gravity. Observers stand frozen, realization dawning that Leo has been fighting while heavily handicapped by this massive weight. Leo's gaze sharpens as a violent surge of mana erupts from his body, tearing through the air and shattering the nearby surroundings. The shockwave ripples outward, signaling the full release of his suppressed power. Celia stares in absolute disbelief, her pride as the sword maiden visibly crumbling. She can only mutter a breathless, unfinished sentence as she witnesses the monstrous aura radiating from the boy she previously dismissed. Leo's eyes glow with a piercing, inhuman red light, and his presence becomes so suffocating that the atmosphere itself seems to thicken. The sheer absurdity of his strength and his training methods forces a silent admission of terror from those watching, as they realize the boy is a total madman for constantly living under such crushing gravity. The scene shifts to the sprawling Plav estate as the sun sets behind the massive stone arches of the academy grounds. Rosina's, the household maid, calls out to Leo as he walks through the courtyard. She informs him that important guests have arrived to visit the family and requires him to offer a formal greeting immediately. Standing in the center of the terrace are two figures, including the vice lord of the Zerdinger clan, G.I. Zerdinger, who waits patiently to evaluate the young prodigy. Leo approaches the distinguished visitors and introduces himself with a short, respectful bow. He states his name clearly as Leo Plav, maintaining his stoic and unshakable demeanor despite the status of the man before him. G.I. Zerdinger steps forward with a knowing, confident smile, extending his hand for a formal greeting. As their hands lock in a firm grip, G.I. maintains a sharp, observant gaze on the boy. He then shifts the conversation toward his own family, asking Leo if he has already had the chance to meet his niece, Celia. Leo glances toward the side, his red eyes sharp and unwavering as he remains unbothered by the growing commotion around him. On the training ground, Celia Zerdinger lies collapsed on the pavement, her expression one of utter disbelief and mounting horror. A nearby soldier rushes toward her side, calling out to the young lady as she struggles to comprehend the reality of her crushing defeat. G.I. Zerdinger observes the scene with a composed posture, his arms crossed firmly over his chest. He acknowledges Leo's performance, stating that defeating a warrior of Celia's caliber is a truly impressive feat for someone his age. Leo looks down at the ground, replying bluntly that Celia's loss was the result of her underestimating his capabilities. G.I. leans in with a look of intrigue, curious about the stakes of the duel, and asks what the specific agreement was between the two combatants. A comical depiction of a defeated, exhausted Celia appears on screen as Leo explains the terms of their wager. He reveals that the loser agreed to become the winner's servant, officially declaring that Celia Zerdinger is now his personal maid. G.I. maintains his aristocratic poise, acknowledging that while keeping one's word is an important virtue, there are certain social boundaries that cannot be crossed. A dark silhouette of G.I. looms over the area as he asserts the immense weight of his family name. He reminds Leo that because Celia belongs to the prestigious Zerdinger bloodline, she cannot be subjected to menial maid work regardless of a bet. Guy's shadow stretches across the ground, physically and metaphorically pressuring the boy to yield. He directly commands Leo to revoke the promise of servitude and release his niece from the humiliating obligation. G.I. begins to suggest an alternative reward to compensate Leo for his victory, but before he can finish the offer, Leo cuts him off with a sudden and firm refusal. Leo stands his ground with a defiant gaze, staring directly into the eyes of the Vice Lord without a hint of fear. He tells G.I. that the pact is a private matter and a binding promise that exists solely between himself and Celia. He shows zero interest in letting the Zerdinger family patriarch interfere with the established terms of the duel. G.I., undeterred by the boy's bluntness, extends his hand as he presents a far more tempting trade. He asks Leo if he would reconsider his refusal if the reward was the secret aura cultivation technique of the Zerdinger family itself. Leo looks G.I. directly in the eye with a calm, dismissive smile. He bluntly states that the Zerdinger family's secret technique seems completely unworthy of learning to him. This blatant rejection strikes G.I. with visible disbelief. The Vice Lord's face tenses as he processes the boy's casual arrogance, realizing Leo isn't just bargaining but is genuinely unimpressed by the legendary cultivation method. G.I. stares down at the white-haired boy, his silhouette framed against the darkening sky. He clarifies the situation, asking if Leo truly desires a member of the Zerdinger family as a maid while labeling their sacred aura cultivation technique as worthless. Leo does not flinch, offering a single, cold confirmation, yes. Guy's eyes narrow as he asks the boy if he considers such a statement to be incredibly rash. Leo stands with his hands behind his back, his expression remaining perfectly stoic. He explains that he has absolutely no intention of insulting the Zerdinger family's prestige or name. He clarifies his stance, telling Sir Gi's that if the cultivation technique had been presented as the formal reward for defeating Celia in the duel, he would have gladly accepted it without any hesitation. Two armored guards stand paralyzed in the shadow of a stone archway. They watch the exchange with dropped jaws, unable to believe a child is speaking to their vice lord with such audacity. The scene shifts to a close-up of Leo, who maintains a slight, knowing smirk. His red eyes gleam with the confidence of a master warrior who understands his own value, completely unfazed by the status of the noble standing before him. Celia stands in the background, the ornate details of her uniform shimmering in the sunset. A realization hits her as she wonders if Leo refused the family's greatest treasure simply because he despised her arrogant attitude during their encounter. Below, the sprawling academy grounds are bathed in an orange glow. The guards remain motionless as the weight of Leo's potential settles over the group, marking him as a child whose existence changes everything for the Zerdinger family. Gi's turns his head toward the surrounding soldiers with a sharp, commanding gaze. He barks a sudden order that echoes through the garden, commanding his men to immediately send Celia to the maid's quarters to fulfill her debt. The guards react with visible shock, sweat beading on their faces as the Sword Maiden's official servitude begins. Gi's then turns back to the boy, standing at his full height. He looks down at the white-haired prodigy and speaks his name with a new level of gravity, Leo. Gi's Zerdinger leans in toward Leo, his gaze fixed intently on the boy as the evening light catches his features. He speaks in a low, composed tone, granting the white-haired prodigy a level of familiarity that few ever achieve. He tells Leo that when they are away from prying eyes and the formalities of the public, he is permitted to address him more personally. Leo accepts the offer instantly, his red eyes showing no sign of intimidation. He speaks the words, "Yes, uncle," with a firm clarity that acknowledges their new, private rapport and the alliance it represents. The sky transitions into a deep twilight, showing clouds streaked with the colors of the setting sun as a thin crescent moon rises over the academy towers. Leo begins his departure, his silhouette moving steadily across the wide, open courtyard of the academy grounds. Behind him, Gi's remains standing motionless, his dark coat billowing slightly in the wind. He watches Leo's retreating figure with a calculated and observant stare, recognizing that the balance of power between the great families has shifted irrevocably following this display of effortless dominance. Celia Zerdinger is shown in a sharp close-up, her red eyes trembling as she stares into the empty space where her pride once stood. She is unable to comprehend the sudden shift in her uncle's attitude or her own forced servitude, letting out a soft, confused gasp. Gi's ignores her visible shock, standing with an air of absolute noble authority while resting a hand on his hip. He looks forward with a confident smirk, declaring his intention to handle the political fallout of this duel. He confirms that he will personally see to persuading his elder brother about Leo's true value. A quiet, luxurious bedroom is revealed, filled with soft light and high-end furniture including a large white bed and an ornate cabinet. The silence is interrupted by a sharp, repetitive knocking sound against the heavy wood of the door. Rosina's is shown in a state of high tension, her breathing heavy as visible sweat drips from her brow. Her red eyes are wide with intense focus as she stands near the bed. She reaches down, clutching the frills of her white apron and black dress, her hands trembling as she prepares to respond to the visitor. The knocking continues with three distinct sounds echoing through the hallway and into the private quarters. A speech bubble appears from the individual standing outside the door, beginning a sentence that suggests the arrival of someone who has been waiting for this specific moment. The words, "I've been," linger in the air, remaining unfinished as the scene focuses on the closed door. The tension of the household's internal affairs hangs heavy as the identity of the person seeking entry remains hidden behind a wooden frame. A bead of sweat rolls down a person's skin just above their eye as the name Celia is declared with sudden clarity. Below, the scene transitions to a pair of sturdy black lace-up boots stepping across a polished floor. The heavy, white-frilled hem of a long-made skirt sways with each movement, belonging to Rosina's as she carries out her duties with a disciplined, rhythmic pace that echoes through the quiet hallway. A golden circular emblem appears, framing two distinct figures against a backdrop of dark, swirling clouds to signal the start of a new chapter. Leo's voice breaks the silence, asking if the current attire doesn't suit her exceptionally well. He holds a thick, blue-bound book in his gloved hands, looking up to explain that the plainness of the maid outfit creates a striking harmony when paired with her inherent elegance. He fixates on the specific combination of these elements, his tone remaining analytical and detached as he observes her. Leo remains seated in a large, ornate armchair, his attention divided between his reading and the woman standing before him. Rosina's is visibly trembling with rage, her face flushed and her hand clenching her white apron so forcefully that her veins bulge against her skin. Realizing her mounting frustration and a physical manifestation of her anger, Leo looks toward her and offers a direct apology, clarifying that his words were not intended to be offensive or insulting to her character. An intricate, carved golden frame appears, surrounding an image of a classical picture as Leo contemplates the nature of aesthetic appreciation. He muses about the existence of individuals who praise beauty to an excessive degree, contemplating how his own views have shifted over time. He acknowledges that his perspective has likely been unconsciously shaped and influenced by the people he knew in his previous life. He leans back into his chair, concluding that in his eyes, a beauty that is both eternal and immortal remains the absolute best standard. Light pours through a stained glass mosaic shaped like a coffin, illuminating various jars and vessels in vibrant shades of purple and blue. The vision shifts to a sunlit grove where a man in heavy, layered gray armor sits peacefully at the base of a towering tree. He is completely surrounded by nature, with a brown deer leaning toward him and a small white rabbit resting at his side. A small chibi icon of Resina's appears at the bottom of the frame, sighing as she expresses the thought that finding a friend who truly admires beauty would be a wonderful occurrence. Dark vertical lines rain down behind two text bubbles explaining a fundamental issue with certain individuals. The internal narration reveals that the primary problem was that they were simply too sincere. It further notes that despite her strict personality, Resina's possessed a demeanor more beautiful than any other. As the frame moves down, the lower bodies of two figures appear, one wearing a brown cloak and holding a staff, while the other wears dark trousers and a white coat. A new name is introduced into the fold, Luna. A man with a heavy blonde beard and a laurel wreath resting on his braided hair leans forward with an intense, shadowed gaze. He asks with total desperation if the person before him would be willing to serve as a nude model for his work. The tension breaks instantly as a comedic scuffle erupts. Stylized figures with wings and capes ruthlessly kick the bearded man while he lies face down on the dirt. Thudding sound effects fill the air while nearby observers laugh at the one-sided beating. Resina's face fills the frame, her red eyes wide and a single bead of sweat rolling down her cheek as she stares downward. She questions Leo, asking if the book he is currently focused on is a special training manual of some kind. Leo sits in a well-lit room, his white hair messy and his red eyes calm as he holds a thick book open. He looks up at her with a slight, knowing smile and asks if she is referring to the specific volume in his hands. The title of the book is revealed in a glowing bubble as The Hero of Beginnings. A flashback bubble appears against a striped background, showing a hand reaching down to pat the head of a 5-year-old girl named Sangria, who has twin tails and bright red eyes. In the present, Resina stares at Leo with a look of deep suspicion. She lets out a thoughtful hum, her eyes narrowing as she processes his intense interest in the ancient legend. Resina turns around and begins to walk across the stone floor of the library, her long black hair swaying behind her white maid's apron. She concludes that Leo must have a profound obsession with the hero of beginnings. She notes that his expertise is so vast that even professional scholars who dedicate their entire lives to researching the world's greatest heroes would not stand a single chance against him in a debate. Resina pauses, her face half turned back toward Leo with her mouth open as if she is about to reveal a specific, lingering thought. She emphasizes that there is something especially notable about his behavior. Before she can finish her sentence, a pale hand reaches out toward a dark wooden shelf filled with various texts. The fingers wrap around the top of a weathered brown book, sliding it out from a row of blue and black volumes as the dust swirls in the light. Resina stands elegantly in the library, holding a reddish-brown book open as she addresses Leo. She explains that some records belong to individuals whose true identities remain a mystery to history. As she looks over the text, she notes that there are those who believe this figure, Kyle, was nothing more than a fraud attempting to steal credit for the achievements of great heroes. Leo sits calmly in an ornate chair, his red eyes narrowing slightly as he repeats the name, Kyle, under his breath, processing her dismissal of his past life's legacy. Resina peers intensely through the gap between the heavy volumes on the dark wooden shelves. The atmosphere shifts as Leo stands, turning his back to the collection of knowledge to focus on the day ahead. He casually asks if they should begin their training session immediately after breakfast is finished. Resina's expression transforms, a dark and eager shadow flickering across her face as she asks the young master for permission to join him in his physical regimen. Leo looks back over his shoulder with a skeptical gaze, warning her that his methods are incredibly difficult to maintain and questioning if she is truly prepared for the strain. A sudden, jagged speech bubble erupts across the screen, carrying the prideful declaration of Celia Zertinger's name. After the title card passes, the scene shifts to a dimly lit training hall where a weapons rack stands filled with various blades and spears. Celia is visible at the bottom of the frame, her hair disheveled and her body hunched over in extreme fatigue. She is gasping for air, sweat dripping as she struggles to remain upright on the polished floor, clearly pushed to her absolute physical breaking point. Leo stands over the fallen girl, his posture relaxed while her gloved hand trembles against the ground. He coldly observes her failure, lecturing her that once stamina hits its absolute limit, a warrior's reactions inevitably slow and their movements become dangerously sloppy. He moves through the space with effortless grace, pointing out that her exhaustion has left her back completely exposed to a fatal strike. Celia can do nothing but emit ragged, heavy breaths, her body straining under the weight of her own fatigue as Leo continues his merciless evaluation of her combat performance. Celia hunches over, her breath hitching as she struggles to maintain her posture in front of the boy. Leo stares down at her with cold indifference, asking if she truly considers her current efforts to be actual training. He bluntly declares that the children of this era seem far too weak, his mind drifting to the fundamental flaws of modern martial arts. He reflects on how aura techniques have technically advanced over the centuries, yet the essential foundation of physical conditioning has been completely neglected. To Leo, aura is merely the tool used to maximize a body's existing strength, a power that is useless if the vessel itself is brittle and untrained. Celia's hands tremble as she grips her training sword, her body emitting a strange sound of disbelief at his arrogance. She looks up with a mixture of shock and fury, unable to process the sheer gap in their abilities. Leo simply shakes his head in a dismissive, casual manner, showing no respect for the Sword Maiden title she carries so proudly. His eyes remain half-closed, bored by the repetitive nature of her predictable movements and the lack of raw physical grit in her combat style. A bright, intense light erupts from Celia's body as she pushes her aura to its absolute limit, her silhouette flickering against the training hall floor. She screams at Leo never to underestimate her, her face contorting with a desperate need to reclaim her family's honor. With a final surge of energy, she lunges forward, her wooden sword cutting through the air in a high-speed strike aimed directly at the white-haired boy. Leo watches her approach with a steady gaze, his hand tightening around his own weapon as he prepares to end the exchange. A massive shockwave detonates at the point of impact, sending a burst of blue energy rippling outward. Celia is instantly overpowered, her body sent spiraling backward through the air with violent force. She crashes hard onto the wooden planks, her sword skittering away as she lies defeated and breathless. Her mind races with agonizing frustration, screaming internally as she demands to know why she cannot win. The sound of heavy, rhythmic footsteps echoing against the floor signals Leo's slow and deliberate approach toward her fallen form. Leo stands over the defeated girl, his shadow looming large as he reaches down toward his own wrist. He tells her to take a look at something, his tone flat and devoid of any celebratory pride. With a sharp metallic click, he unfastens a heavy object and tosses it toward her, the weight creating a resonant thud. Celia lets out a scream of pure shock as the truth of his handicap is revealed. The massive weight bracelet hits the ground, exposing that Leo has been fighting with a crushing physical burden the entire time. A heavy metallic ring sits embedded in the dirt at Leo's feet, the impact still echoing through the quiet training grounds. Leo looks down with a cold, unwavering gaze as he confirms the item is a specialized bracelet enchanted with weight magic. He doesn't offer a hand to help his fallen opponent, instead standing tall with a smug, knowing smile that shadows his face. With a tone of absolute authority, he tells Celia that from tomorrow onward, she will be required to wear this crushing weight during every one of her training sessions to truly understand the gap between them. The afternoon sun filters through the dense canopy of trees, casting long shadows across the wide academy field where the duel has just concluded. Celia stares at the ground in a daze, her face flushing a deep crimson as the weight of her defeat and the revelation of Leo's handicap settle in. She stammers out a broken realization, her previous arrogance completely shattered by the boy standing before her. Standing further back, G.I.'s Zerdinger watches the scene unfold with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable but focused. He concludes internally that this crushing experience is exactly what Celia needs to grow beyond her current limits. A sharp shout cuts through the tense atmosphere as someone calls out Leo's name, drawing the boy's attention away from his defeated rival. Leo turns his head slightly, his white hair shimmering under the bright sky as he looks toward the source of the voice. In the distance, Celia remains slumped on the ground, a small, defeated figure against the backdrop of the massive training area. She looks up and weakly acknowledges the newcomer, calling out to her uncle as G.I.'s begins to close the distance between the two young martial artists. G.I.'s approaches with a measured stride, his eyes locked onto Leo with a new level of profound respect and interest. He stops before the boy and makes a declaration that changes everything, stating his intention to petition the family head for a massive favor. He reveals he wants Leo to be the one to inherit the legendary Phoenix Breath, a technique of immense power and prestige. Leo stands perfectly still, his red eyes wide as he absorbs the gravity of an offer that is usually reserved only for the direct bloodline of the Zerdinger elite. Ethereal flames and ornate, swirling patterns manifest in the air as the legend of the Phoenix Breath is invoked. This technique is described as the origin of all their power, a sacred martial art that forms the very foundation of their family's strength. A majestic image of a phoenix made of pure, radiant fire erupts behind the conversation, its wings spread wide in a display of celestial dominance. It is a power that only those acknowledged by the highest authorities of the family can ever hope to possess, and the air crackles with heat and light as the path to this ultimate inheritance is laid out before Leo. Celia stands with her mouth agape, her eyes wide with visible shock as she processes a sudden revelation. Her hand is clenched at her side, her academy uniform crisp as she confronts the reality of the situation. Standing before her uncle, G.I.'s Zerdinger, she and Leo wait for the final details of their enrollment terms. G.I.'s, maintaining his professional and commanding presence, calmly presents a specific condition that catches the duo off guard. Upon hearing the news, Celia erupts in complete disbelief, shouting, "What?" as the weight of the announcement hits her. She is told that the Lumeran entrance exam is not a written test, but a strictly practical, combat-oriented assessment. She immediately turns her gaze toward Leo, her brow furrowed with mounting concern over the physical nature of the upcoming trial. Celia's expression tightens further, sweat beading on her forehead as her mind races through the potential dangers for her master. She looks directly at the adults, her voice strained as she argues that such a practical exam is far too dangerous for someone like young Master Leo. She believes the environment of the test will be unforgiving and that Leo's safety is being neglected. Deep down, she is convinced that practical experience is the one critical area where he is deficient, fearing he hasn't faced real-world combat scenarios. However, Leo stands perfectly still beside her, his white hair catching the light as a subtle and cold smirk plays on his lips. While Celia remains consumed by her worry for his survival, Leo reflects on his own hidden history. He knows the ultimate truth, that in this life, his soul carries the weight of 1,000 battles, making him more prepared than anyone present. G.I. watches the interaction with a sharp, calculating eye, his gaze shifting from the frantic and protective Celia to the remarkably composed white-haired boy. He leans forward slightly, asking Leo directly for his thoughts on the challenge, giving him the floor to speak for himself. G.I. explains the high-level politics involved, noting that the Academy Board has promised they would respect whatever decision Leo reaches regarding the test. He wants to ensure Leo isn't being forced into a situation he isn't ready to dominate. As he speaks, a sharp and confident smile spreads across Guy's face, hidden slightly by his groomed beard. He senses the immense potential radiating from the boy and anticipates a decision that will change the Academy's power dynamic forever. High above the Academy grounds, bright green leaves flutter violently in the breeze, swirling against a backdrop of the afternoon sun. The peaceful atmosphere of the garden transitions into the chaotic energy of the upcoming trials. The scene shifts toward the dense foliage of the Academy's training grounds where a defiant voice echoes through the trees. A student shouts out in frustration or challenge, yelling, "Who said I couldn't keep up?" as they struggle to match a frantic pace. Wisps of white and yellow energy trail through the air like magical exhaust, indicating that high-level movement techniques are being utilized. The days begin to bleed together as the students push themselves to their limits. 1 week passes in a flash of intense preparation and mounting tension. The time for talk has ended, and the official start of the Lumeran Academy entrance trials has arrived. A wide aerial view reveals the bustling courtyard of Lumeran Academy on the official day of the entrance trials. Dozens of students in dark blue uniforms gather in clusters, their conversations creating a low hum of anticipation across the stone tiles. In the center of the plaza, Celia Zerdinger stands out in her ornate white and gold military-style uniform, drawing the collective gaze of every student present. Whispers ripple through the crowd as the onlookers recognize the famous prodigy, pointing her out to one another as the legendary Sword Maiden. Many have arrived early specifically for the chance to see her in person before the high-stakes assessments begin. Celia turns her gaze toward Leo, a playful smile touching her lips as she observes his stoic, unchanging expression. She asks him directly if he is feeling nervous, addressing him as, "Young Master," despite the public setting and the hundreds of eyes watching them. Leo remains silent, his piercing red eyes fixed forward with an air of total indifference to the surrounding crowd and the prestige of the Academy. Seeing his lack of reaction, Celia's expression shifts into a more mischievous, stylized look as she suggests that he should perhaps work on fixing his blunt way of speaking for the sake of appearances. Leo's face remains a mask of boredom, showing zero interest in her social critique or the mounting pressure of the day. Rhythmic footsteps echo against the stone as a new figure approaches the pair with aggressive purpose. A red-haired male student in a standard academy blazer strides forward, his brow furrowed in a look of utter disbelief. He stops short, his eyes widening and teeth gritting as they land on the white-haired boy standing next to the highborn Celia. The red-haired student shouts Leo Plov's name aloud, his voice cutting sharply through the ambient noise of the courtyard. His expression is one of pure shock and indignation, as if the mere presence of Leo at Lumeran Academy is an impossibility or a personal insult to the institution's standards. The red-haired student leans aggressively toward Leo, his face contorted with a mocking sneer as he questions why someone who cannot even use aura would bother showing up at the Academy trials. He doesn't wait for a response, immediately shifting his demeanor to one of exaggerated, fawning politeness as he turns to address Celia Zerdinger. He offers her a formal greeting, asking if she has been well and attempting to establish a social connection in front of the other students. However, his efforts fall completely flat. In a stylized visual shift, both Leo and Celia stand perfectly still with deadpan expressions, completely ignoring the boy's existence as if he were nothing more than background noise in the plaza. Visible frustration builds in the red-haired student's posture as he adjusts his white gloves and straightens his blazer, trying to salvage the interaction. He desperately reminds Celia that he was the one who greeted her when she visited the school previously, hoping to trigger some memory of his status. The perspective shifts to Celia's crossed arms and her distinctive white uniform as she delivers a cold, immediate response. Without a hint of hesitation, warmth, or recognition, she tells him plainly that she does not remember him at all. Her rejection is total and effortless, effectively ending his attempt to insert himself into their circle. Celia dismisses the boy with a final, curt goodbye as she turns her back and begins to walk away. The red-haired student is left standing frozen in the middle of the crowd, his mouth agape and face pale with public humiliation while the other students look on in silence. Leo and Celia move in unison, their footsteps synchronized as they head toward the brightly lit entrance of the main academy building. The intense light from the hallway spills out onto the ground, framing their departure from the courtyard. They leave the stunned student and the petty social posturing behind, focusing their attention entirely on the official trials that await them within the academy's walls. A wide bird's-eye view reveals the academy courtyard bathed in the patterned shadows of the surrounding stone architecture. Students in various dark uniforms navigate the open floor as Leo and Celia walk together, their synchronized presence drawing immediate attention from the crowd. Celia suddenly stops in her tracks, her eyes wide with recognition and her mouth slightly agape as she spots a familiar group approaching from the distance. A formal notification window appears on the screen, identifying the primary newcomer as Avid Lolan, a 16-year-old member of the prominent Lolan family who stands with an air of refined authority. Leo remains perfectly calm at Celia's side, his piercing red eyes scanning the environment with his characteristic lack of emotion while the social atmosphere around them begins to shift. The perspective shifts to the ornate details of the Lolan family uniforms, highlighting gold chains and intricate silver embroidery set against deep blue fabric. Another identification window materializes, revealing 14-year-old Chelsea Lolan, who accompanies her older brother with a poised and stoic expression. A calm voice calls out, stating it has been a long time since they last met Celia, the words hanging in the air with a sense of underlying family rivalry. In a grand, sweeping view of the academy's sun-drenched hallway, the title, "The Legendary Hero is an Academy Honor Student," appears over the bustling scene. A loud, sharp shout of Celia's name echoes across the marble floors, causing several nearby students to turn their heads in curiosity. The scale of the academy's interior is massive, with high vaulted ceilings and massive pillars that frame the central path where this encounter is taking place. Celia's hand, clad in a tight black leather glove, clenches into a firm fist as she processes the arrival of the two siblings. The physical tension in her posture is visible as she stares forward, the shadow of her long dark hair partially obscuring her face while she mentally identifies the group for Leo. She explains with a sense of urgency that the individuals approaching are the Lolan siblings, members of a family that clearly holds a significant and competitive position in her social circle. Her expression hardens into one of pure annoyance, her red eyes narrowing as she looks toward the two figures who represent a direct challenge to her family's prestige. She stands her ground firmly, refusing to show any signs of weakness or hesitation in front of Leo or her longtime rivals. Celia's frustration boils over as a single bright red glint flashes in her eye, her teeth gritted in a display of fierce, unyielding competitiveness. She turns her head slightly toward Leo, warning him that the Lolan siblings are also taking the academy entrance test and that losing to them is strictly prohibited. She declares with absolute certainty that it is completely unacceptable for the Zerdinger family to fall behind the Lolans in any capacity during these trials. The light blue-haired Avid Lolan steps forward into the light, repeating his greeting to Celia with a calm, almost condescending tone that suggests a history of shared interactions. The focus remains on the sharp contrast between the Lolan's pristine, sparkling appearance and the growing intensity of Celia's aura as she prepares herself for the impending academic struggle. The camera pulls back to show the standoff from behind the Lolan siblings, framing Leo and Celia against the expansive, sun-patterned floor of the courtyard. Avid peers over at Leo with a judgmental gaze, his voice cool and inquisitive as he asks Celia who exactly the white-haired boy standing next to her is. Celia crosses her arms defensively over her white and gold uniform, her face set in a defiant scowl as she prepares to provide a direct answer to the query. Leo, however, looks completely disinterested in the social posturing, his eyes half closed with a bored expression while a thought bubble reveals he is simply dreaming of being back home. Celia ignores his lack of enthusiasm and firmly identifies him to the rivals as Leo Plav of the Plav family, officially introducing her companion into the hierarchy of the academy's elite. A piercing light blue eye filled with calculated intent fills the vision, set against a backdrop of deep shadows and the sharp, crimson iris of Leo. The perspective shifts to the blue-haired girl as she makes her exit, her dark cloak fluttering behind her as she walks away into the bright light of the academy's ornate windows. She does not bother looking back, addressing Celia with absolute confidence as she declares that the top position in their year will definitely be hers. She commands her subordinate, Chelsea, to follow her, leaving the challenge hanging in the air as they disappear from the immediate area. Celia stands rooted to the spot, a visible vein of irritation throbbing on her forehead as she watches the rivals depart. She mutters under her breath, labeling them as incredibly annoying people and making a firm vow to herself that she will be the one to defeat them in the trials to come. The scene transitions with a heavy sound effect, a low rumbling laughter that vibrates through the air. A voice cuts through the tension, observing that it seems every student has finally arrived and is ready for the assembly to begin. The camera pulls back to reveal the grand scale of the academy's interior, where rows of students in dark uniforms stand before a high, wooden balcony. High above the crowd, a man with light, ruffled hair stands at a podium, bathed in the glow of the massive arched windows behind him. Leo and Celia stand together in the center of the hall, their heads tilted back as they observe the authority figure overlooking the assembly. The man on the balcony is dressed in a dark shirt and a white blazer, his tie hanging loosely as he adjusts it with a casual, almost bored motion. He leans into the microphone and introduces himself as Albi, the one in charge of the current proceedings. A bold title card flashes across the screen against a shimmering white background, marking the official transition into the Academy's testing phase. Back in the assembly hall, Leo maintains a stoic and disinterested posture, his hands buried deep in his pockets as he stands amidst the sea of students. Celia remains at his side, her expression much more focused and alert than his. A wave of murmurs begins to ripple through the gathered crowd, the sound of many voices whispering at once as the students question the identity of the man standing before them. One student's voice rises above the rest, asking specifically who this person is. Leo gazes forward with his signature bored expression as the whispers identify the man on the podium as a renowned hero of the current era. As Leo watches Albi, a dark and swirling aura of mana begins to manifest in his vision, focusing intensely on the speaker's facial features. Leo's internal focus zeroes in on the man's left eye, noting that the mana residing within it is distinct and unmistakable. On the displays above the hall, glowing golden and red icons materialize to illustrate the coming challenges. One icon shows a sword crossed over a shield, representing combat against other students, while the other depicts a fierce, snarling dragon. Albi continues his explanation, stating that the upcoming tests will force them into both direct duels and monster subjugation missions. A parchment scroll suddenly ignites with a flicker of orange flame as Albi continues his instructions. He looks toward the assembled students, informing them that each individual will be required to complete the 2 specific assessments in a predetermined order. The burning paper signals the official start of the Academy's rigorous evaluation process, casting a warm glow over the immediate area as the magical contract of the test takes effect. Leo stands with his back to the camera, looking down at the floor with a visible sense of boredom. He mutters a single word, annoying, as the golden magical circles on the ground begin to react to the presence of the students. While the others are filled with anticipation or dread, Leo's posture remains entirely relaxed, his hands at his sides as he stares at the flickering embers of the magical prompt. A high-angle perspective looks down upon the rows of students standing on the intricate, patterned floor of the Academy Hall. Their long shadows stretch across the polished surface, creating a rhythmic pattern of dark lines that emphasize the sheer number of participants. The grand architecture of the hall looms over them, signifying the weight of the institution they are desperately trying to enter, yet Leo remains a distinct, stoic figure among the crowd. A vibrant, translucent green interface manifests in the air, taking the form of a thick, ornate book. Bold white text appears across the center of the display, announcing that the hero record has been opened. Digital artifacts and glowing particles dance around the edges of the holographic tome, indicating the activation of a high-level, unique skill that bypasses the standard Academy systems. Leo appears in a transformed state within a void of swirling golden energy, now wearing thin-framed glasses and a white laboratory coat. He raises a single finger as a massive, glowing book floats before him, radiating an intense, blinding light that obscures the background. This version of Leo exudes a cold, calculated intelligence, looking like a scholar of absolute power as he prepares to manipulate the parameters of the trial. A new system notification appears over a dark, blood-red background featuring a coiled snake and staff emblem. The text identifies the current phase as Chapter, Prologue, Forest of Beasts. The interface is surrounded by streaks of golden mana and ancient runes, signaling that the environment is shifting to accommodate the monster subjugation portion of the Academy's test. Explosive waves of golden light surge through the hall, turning the silhouettes of the other students into dark flickers against a sea of brilliance. The floor seems to dissolve into pure energy as the spatial magic takes hold, dragging the participants from the safety of the Academy Hall and thrusting them into the simulated reality of the assessment. The sheer scale of the magical output creates a visual storm that fills the entire frame. Leo looks upward through his glasses, his expression completely flat despite the chaotic magical papers flying rapidly around his head. The golden light reflects off his lenses, hiding his eyes as he stands at the center of the magical vortex. He remains the eye of the storm, unaffected by the turbulence of the teleportation or the complexity of the record he has summoned. The open pages of the hero record flutter violently as Leo speaks, his voice cutting through the hum of the magical energy. He states that inefficiency is intolerable, signaling his refusal to follow the slow, standard procedure established by the academy instructors. Below him, circular runes and sparks of mana continue to ignite, fueling the massive spell he is currently weaving. A massive pillar of golden light erupts vertically, nearly swallowing the figure of Celia and the other nearby students. The intensity of the mana creates thick, physical streaks of power that crackle through the air. The environment begins to blur and warp, showing glimpses of the forest that is about to manifest around them as Leo forces the transition to accelerate. A close-up of Leo's face reveals one piercing red eye visible through his white hair as he gazes forward with absolute authority. He declares that he will combine everything and proceed at once, intending to merge the combat and subjugation tests into a single event. The background is a wash of white and gold, highlighting the terrifying confidence of a hero who views the Academy's ultimate challenges as a mere waste of time. The scene transitions into a heavy mist of gray and brown, where the remnants of the Academy Hall fade away into a textured, parchment-like haze. The golden light begins to dim, replaced by the shadows of a new, unknown environment. The shift is complete, leaving the area silent as the magical signatures stabilize in the heart of the forest of beasts. A row of polished wooden desks is lined with heavy, leather-bound books as students sit in focused silence. Leo remains motionless at his seat, his white hair contrasting against the dark wood of the Academy furniture while he listens to the opening lecture. The explanation continues, noting that the Academy's true value lies within its specialized systems rather than just its prestige. A large, open book glows with a radiant yellow light, displaying intricate diagrams of magical circles and ancient scripts across its pages. This system allows the Academy to recreate the hero's world, a powerful dimensional simulation used for elite development and historical immersion. A vibrant tapestry depicts a knight in full plate armor thrusting a silver sword into the maw of a giant, shadowy dragon. The golden energy of the simulation flows across the image, highlighting the legacy of the warriors who came before and the monsters they once vanquished. The narration confirms that through this method, students can actually inherit the power of previous heroes by reliving their greatest trials. Below this imagery, a golden scepter sits encased in an ornate frame against a blue patterned wall, representing the rewards of the past. The reality of the curriculum becomes clear as Leo recognizes that this is practically a hero training ground designed to force rapid growth. A close-up shows the sharp details of Leo's academy uniform, featuring a dark blazer and a perfectly knotted black tie. He stands tall, his expression unchanging as the artificial environment begins to take shape around him. The stone walls of the classroom dissolve, replaced by the towering trunks and thick canopy of an ancient woodland. A title card appears over the scene, identifying this location as the Forest of Beasts. Leo looks up at the sunlight filtering through the leaves, observing the vastness of the simulated environment. He quietly acknowledges that this is the hero's world he was told about. Dark, spindly branches create a jagged frame against a sky painted in shades of orange and deep purple. The forest floor is swallowed by thick shadows as the specific rules of the assessment are broadcast to all participants. Large text bubbles appear in the air, stating that whether the students choose to cooperate with one another or eliminate each other, they are free to do whatever it takes to survive. The trial is absolute, and the environment is designed to be unforgiving. Another message follows, explaining that if a student wants to give up, they must break the magic orb in their possession to be returned to the academy immediately. Leo stands firmly in a clearing, flanked by two other male students who grip their training weapons with trembling hands. One of the students looks around frantically, sweating as he asks what that strange sound is coming from the nearby brush. Leo ignores the boy's panic, looking at the trees with a sense of deep, personal recognition. He thinks to himself that this place is the same as it has ever been, regardless of the time that has passed. A close-up of a leather boot stepping through the grass emphasizes the physical reality of the zone. Leo recalls that before this land was corrupted by the beast Queen Silituna, it was originally the peaceful elves' forest. A vision of the forest's past shows a majestic treehouse built into a massive, glowing trunk, surrounded by magical butterflies and soft light. This peaceful memory is violently torn away by a jagged black shape and a sudden burst of orange fire that consumes the beautiful landscape. In the present, a speech bubble from one of the nearby cadets erupts with a panicked, "WH as something moves in the darkness. The screen cuts to the terrified faces of the other students standing behind Leo as they realize they are in over their heads. One student screams that he wants to go back, his voice cracking with desperation as the true danger of the forest of beasts reveals itself. Leo stands motionless amidst the chaotic shadows of the forest while the students around him descend into a state of visible panic. One cadet's face is frozen in a scream of terror as the darkness closes in, but Leo remains completely unfazed by the atmospheric pressure. He looks toward the source of the disturbance and coldly declares that the entire scenario is just a pathetic illusion. As he speaks, a speech bubble emerges from the thicket, directly contradicting him. An unseen assailant's voice rings out, telling Leo that he is wrong. The voice explains that while the environment is indeed a world recreated from the specific memories of Proctor Albee, the physical consequences within it are far from imaginary. The dense thicket of the forest of beasts is shown in a wide shot, with gnarled branches and sharp thorns creating a claustrophobic barrier against the fading light. The atmosphere shifts from a mere test to a lethal confrontation as the mysterious speaker warns Leo that he will truly lose his life if he remains overconfident. A sharp, high-pitched whistling sound effect, yo, cuts through the air, signaling the arrival of a projectile or a rapid movement. Leo's eyes sharpen as he tracks the source of the sound, his white hair catching the faint glint of moonlight as he prepares for an immediate physical engagement. A massive arc of luminous green energy slices through the frame, carving a destructive path through the trees and ground. The sheer force of the blow creates a vacuum that pulls at the surrounding foliage, nearly striking Leo where he stands. The ground erupts in a shower of dirt and shattered wood as the sound effect, PUK, indicates a heavy impact nearby. A silhouette lands gracefully among the autumn leaves, their presence marked by a rustle of the undergrowth. The attacker remains partially obscured by the shifting shadows of the trees, maintaining a predatory distance while assessing Leo's lack of a defensive reaction. A glowing green weapon blade is seen buried deep in the forest floor, vibrating with residual magical power as the dust begins to settle. The female voice speaks again, asking Leo if they have met before, her tone shifting into one of arrogant familiarity. The scene transitions to a view of the sun-drenched autumn leaves above, contrasting the beauty of the academy grounds with the lethal intent of the speaker. She openly expresses her sadistic pleasure at the situation, stating that she is glad to have the opportunity to take down someone associated with the prestigious Serdinger family. The camera focuses on the attacker's lower half, revealing a dark, pleated academy skirt adorned with white frills and paired with vibrant red stockings. She steps forward with a confidence that suggests she has already won the encounter. Simultaneously, a close-up of Leo shows his stoic profile as swirling currents of blue and green mana begin to manifest around his neck and shoulders. The air crackles with the sound effect, Wyack, denoting the rapid circulation of high-density magical energy. Leo does not draw a weapon, instead allowing the mana to surge around him as he prepares to neutralize the threat with effortless precision. Vibrant streaks of cyan and black energy explode across the screen as the attacker's mana reaches its peak intensity. She shouts at Leo, accusing him of being the one who was seen traveling with Celia earlier in the day. The final frame provides a full reveal of the battle magician, a girl with wavy light blue hair and a sharp, focused gaze. She wears a specialized combat uniform and wields a massive, ornate silver scythe that glows with a terrifying blue light. She holds the weapon in a low, ready stance, the curved blade reflecting the dim forest light as she prepares to launch a finishing blow against the reincarnated hero. Leo Plov stares forward with an icy, unwavering gaze. His piercing red eyes show no sign of intimidation as the wind ruffles his white hair. The scene shifts to a wide profile, revealing the massive distance in presence between the two students. The battle magician stands ready, her grip firm on the handle of her ornate silver scythe. The weapon is nearly twice her height, its curved edge glowing with a sinister blue light that pierces through the forest's shadows. She observes Leo's total lack of a defensive stance and finds his composure insulting. She breaks the silence, her voice filled with a mix of arrogance and curiosity. She demands to know why he remains so calm, even as she stands before him with a weapon drawn and intent to kill. A sharp, metallic hum fills the air as the battle magician initiates her strike. The frame blurs with the speed of her movement, showing a streak of glowing turquoise energy cutting through the darkness. She rotates her body, using the momentum to swing the massive scythe in a wide, horizontal arc. The blade itself ignites with a vibrant green magical aura, manifesting complex runic circles that rotate around the steel. This is no ordinary physical strike. It is a magically enhanced execution designed to end the fight before it truly begins. The sheer force of the swing creates a vacuum, pulling in the surrounding leaves as the glowing edge of the scythe closes in on Leo's neck. The screen flashes with the intensity of the impact as the scythe connects with its target. A massive shockwave ripples through the ground, depicted by jagged lines of energy and flying debris. The sound of the blade burying itself into the earth echoes throughout the clearing. As the dust settles, the heavy silver blade is seen lodged deep into the forest floor, its magical glow slowly fading. Leo stands perfectly still, his hands resting casually at his sides. He has moved with such precision and economy of motion that he didn't even need to retreat. He stands mere inches from the buried blade, looking down at the weapon as if it were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. The battle magician's expression shifts from confidence to sheer bewilderment. Her eyes widen as she looks at the boy she just tried to execute, unable to process how he survived. She begins to speculate internally, questioning if Leo possesses a rare aura attribute that is exceptionally hard for even skilled mages to detect. Leo finally breaks his silence, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. He suggests that they stop this useless confrontation and cooperate instead. He reminds her that the Academy's test specifically rewards those who survive the longest with the highest scores, implying a temporary truce would be mutually beneficial. However, his face remains a mask of superiority. A small, dark chuckle escapes his lips as he looks at her with predatory intent. He utters a low heh, revealing that his offer of cooperation is nothing more than a prelude to her total subjugation. The battle magician's face is framed by swirling ribbons of green energy as she wears a confident, mocking smile. She dismisses Leo's previous words, stating that it is too bad for him, but she is a battle magician. A wide shot reveals the massive scale of the mana she is calling forth, with winds whipping violently around her in a localized storm. Leo stands several paces away, holding his sword loosely at his side, seemingly unimpressed by the spectacle of power unfolding before him. He maintains a relaxed posture, his white hair barely fluttering in the gale she has created. Leo tilts his head back and sighs, closing his eyes with an expression of pure apathy. He gestures dismissively with his hand as he asks if she heard his assessment, bluntly stating that for a wind spell, the attack was far too monotonous. This critique sends the magician into a spiral of disbelief and fury. A tight close-up on her eye shows her pupils shaking with indignation as she asks if he is actually lecturing her on magic. She screams that she is a direct descendant of the prestigious Lolan family, a lineage known for its magical prowess, and she will not be insulted by a common student. Driven by insulted pride, the magician swings her orb-tipped staff through the air with all her might. A giant, glowing magic circle erupts in front of her, manifesting sharp, compressed blades of air as she roars the name of her incantation, Wind Sickle. However, the moment the spell should have launched, the brilliant green light dies instantly. The energy disperses into thin air without a sound, leaving the magician standing in stunned, wide-eyed silence. She stares at the void where her magic was just a second ago, her mind reeling as she realizes her lethal spell has been completely erased. Cold sweat beads on the magician's forehead as she trembles, her eyes wide with a new kind of visceral fear. She thinks to herself in a panic that she cannot sense any trace of mana at all, as if the very source of magic has been extinguished from the world. In that split second of her confusion, Leo moves with predatory efficiency. He becomes a blur of motion, closing the gap between them instantly. He is suddenly standing directly in front of her, his hand reaching out to seize her as speed lines emphasize his overwhelming velocity and physical dominance. The magician's face is a mask of pure, unadulterated terror as she stares into Leo's piercing red eyes from mere inches away. She is paralyzed, unable to even draw a breath to scream as his presence looms over her like a suffocating shadow. High above the forest canopy, a flock of birds takes flight in a panicked swarm as a sharp, cracking sound of impact echoes through the clearing. The force of the movement is sudden and decisive, signaling the absolute end of the confrontation. The battle magician's knees hit the forest floor with a heavy thud as she lets out a pained, hollow groan. She is hunched over on the dirt, her spirit and body broken by the swiftness of Leo's assault. Leo stands tall over her trembling form, looking down with a face devoid of any emotion, pity, or mercy. The sunlight catches his white hair as he looms over his defeated opponent, his eyes glowing with the quiet, terrifying authority of a superior being. He stares at her kneeling form, his shadow completely covering her as he waits for her to acknowledge her total defeat. A set of translucent notification boxes flicker rapidly against a shimmering, light-colored backdrop, signifying a system transition or announcement within the Academy's interface. Inside a grand Academy lecture hall, rows of students are seated at wooden desks, their eyes fixed on a massive holographic blue screen that dominates the front of the stage. The students murmur amongst themselves until one voice rises above the rest, shouting, "Wow, it's finally starting," as the screen begins to pulse with power. Suddenly, the scene shifts to a deep blue void where a brilliant, cross-shaped burst of white light explodes in the center. Particles of energy scatter across the frame as the intensity of the magical light reaches its peak, signaling the start of a new trial or a shift back to the reality of the forest encounter. The battle magician with wavy light blue hair is revealed in a state of total defeat, her body lashed firmly to a jagged wooden pillar. Multiple layers of thick, glowing green ropes wrap around her torso and legs, pinning her arms to her sides and lifting her slightly off the forest floor as she hangs helplessly. A wide shot of the dark woods shows the small, isolated clearing where a campfire burns, sending sparks flying into the night air. Leo is positioned near the base of the pillar, his white hair contrasting sharply against the pitch-black silhouettes of the trees. The camera pushes in on Leo's face, which is partially obscured by a heavy, dark shadow. His mouth is curled into a cold, menacing grin, and his eyes burn with a sharp, blank white radiance that signifies his overwhelming power. He looks up at his captive with an expression of pure, predatory satisfaction. A stylized, small version of Celia with long black hair appears against a dark background, her red eyes wide with a look of dread as she mutters, "I feel a chill," reflecting her instinctive unease at the aura Leo is projecting. Dark silhouettes of leaves and branches sway in the foreground, framing the secret clearing where the interrogation takes place. From a high-altitude perspective, the campfire looks like a small orange beacon in the middle of the vast, black wilderness. Several white, bird-like shapes drift lazily through the air, circling the pillar where the magician is held captive. The firelight flickers against the rough bark of the trees and the dry ground, creating long, dancing shadows that stretch out into the impenetrable darkness of the surrounding woods as the night deepens. Leo tilts his head slightly as he examines his work, letting out a short, dismissive that echoes through the quiet clearing. The battle magician stares down at her restraints and the roaring fire at her feet, her expression shifting from confusion to absolute horror as the reality of her situation sets in. She looks up at Leo with a face drained of color and cries out, "What is this?" as her composure completely shatters under the weight of her humiliation. Leo stands up fully, his tall figure blocking out the light of the campfire and looming over the bound girl. From a perspective behind Leo, he appears as a dark, indomitable silhouette that completely dominates the frame. He stares directly into her panicked eyes and asks the final, chilling question, "Will you cooperate with me or not?" The girl remains frozen, pinned against the pillar as she awaits the consequences of her answer. Chelsea Llewellyn struggles against the thick green vines binding her tightly to a large wooden pillar. She grits her teeth and shouts, "Never," with absolute defiance, refusing to yield. A tight close-up shows her face in high detail, capturing her trembling pupils and the sweat forming on her brow. Her light blue hair is disheveled as she glares back at her captor with a mix of fury and desperation. Despite her current immobilization, her expression remains fierce, fueled by her family pride and an initial refusal to submit to Leo's demands. Leo Plov remains unfazed by her outburst and extends his right hand toward his prisoner. A vibrant, red geometric magic circle manifests instantly above his palm, crackling with concentrated mana. The complex sigils within the formation rotate slowly as he prepares to activate the spell's primary function. Leo looks directly at Chelsea with a cold, analytical gaze that betrays no emotion. He speaks in a matter-of-fact tone, informing her that his mana reserves are currently limited. Because of this, he explains that he cannot maintain the magical formation for an extended period, implying his next action will be immediate. Chelsea scoffs at the display, her voice still dripping with lingering arrogance. She tells Leo that this kind of restraint is easy to break and asks if he truly thinks she will give him the time he needs to focus his energy. Leo does not offer a verbal rebuttal to her taunts. Instead, a close-up of the lower half of his face reveals a chilling, confident smirk forming on his lips. Before Chelsea can attempt to struggle further, a sharp, white trail of energy slashes through the frame like a pressurized whip. The sound of the air being sliced echoes through the clearing. Violent orange sparks and magical flames erupt at Chelsea's feet, licking the base of the pillar where she is bound. Chelsea's eyes widen in genuine horror as the heat intensifies, and she lets out a shrill scream that pierces the silence of the forest of beasts. The magical discharge grows more volatile, casting a harsh, flickering glow over her terrified features. Leo stands firmly in front of the blaze, his silhouette appearing dark and imposing against the fire. He ignores her cries for mercy and issues a single, crushing command to cooperate. He then demands she swear her submission on her family's name. Chelsea's face is a mask of pure distress, her previous pride completely shattered by the heat and Leo's unrelenting pressure. She looks downward, her eyes squeezed shut and her mouth open in a frantic plea as the reality of her defeat sinks in. Leo watches her from a high angle, his red eyes glowing with an intense light while the rest of his face remains heavily shadowed. Pushed to her absolute breaking point, Chelsea finally yields. She screams at the top of her lungs that she will cooperate, begging Leo to stop the spell immediately as she offers her total surrender. A deafening scream of "Aya" erupts from Chelsea as her mental fortitude completely shatters under Leo's pressure. Above the chaotic scene, a final thought marks her as nothing more than a child compared to the power standing before her. Leo steps toward her, the sound of his heavy footsteps punctuating the silence that follows her outburst. He looks down at his new captive and calmly states that he is looking forward to working with her. His face is a mask of stoic indifference, his piercing red eyes reflecting a cold calculatedness as he officially secures her cooperation for the next phase of his plan. Light catches the intricate glass facets of a massive chandelier hanging in a grand hall of high authority. The perspective shifts away from the woods and into a prestigious courtroom-style setting where the Academy's elite gather in silent observation. They sit behind long wooden benches, their faces illuminated by the glow of a massive magical display showing live feeds from the forest of beasts. This is the observation room where every trial participant's life is scrutinized by those in power. The spectators watch the blue-tinted screens with intense focus, waiting to see which of the highborn students will distinguish themselves. The magical monitor zooms in on Celia Zerdinger as she tears through her opposition with clinical precision. A text bubble appears on the screen, dismissing the current threats as merely low-level beasts that offer no real challenge to her. The internal monologue of an observer declares that choosing competition is an act of utter foolishness for those who lack true strength. Only 2 students are deemed to have quickly grasped the essence of the task at hand. The first name emphasized is Celia Zerdinger, whose combat prowess has already placed her in a tier of her own as the screen pans across the dark, sprawling woods. The second name to be praised by the observers is Avid Lulin, leading them to conclude that the Empire has a bright future with such talents leading the way. However, the calm of the observation room is suddenly interrupted by a sharp movement within the forest. A student lets out a short, startled as the environment changes and a massive, curved energy slash cuts through the air. The blade effect vibrates with power, slicing across the frame with lethal intent. Leo stares directly ahead, his red eyes glowing with renewed intensity as he senses the shift. The once predictable hunt has just become a lethal struggle against an emerging, high-level threat. Avid stands within a glowing magical circle, his presence radiating a cold and calculating authority. An internal narration notes that while the current target lacks the raw brilliance and overwhelming strength possessed by Celia or Avid, they possess a different utility entirely. A large screen in a separate hall monitors the trial from a distance as a figure with light hair stands before a podium, observing the proceedings with a detached, clinical gaze. High above the forest floor, a massive, jagged spike of teal energy descends with terminal velocity. It strikes a dark beast squarely in the center, pinning the creature to the earth as a burst of light erupts from the point of impact. Immediately following this, a horizontal arc of blue mana slices through the air with surgical precision. It catches a fanged monster mid-leap, severing its head cleanly as dark fluid sprays against the backdrop of the intense struggle. In the heart of the forest, multiple monsters fall simultaneously, their bodies shredded by invisible blades. Leo moves with a calm, lethal rhythm, while the frightened student with purple hair struggles to keep pace amidst the spreading carnage. The purple-haired student eventually pauses, catching his breath as he admits that having a knight around is incredibly convenient. He grows curious and asks Leo what specific aura he is utilizing, noting that he hasn't sensed a single drop of mana from him since the battle began. Leo stands firm, his hands resting near his waist as he bluntly reveals that he does not know how to use aura at all. This confession leaves the student stunned, his voice breaking as he questions how such feats are even possible without a foundational power source. Leo dismisses the confusion, stating that the same principles apply to wind magic. He poses a philosophical question to his peer, asking what the boy believes to be the true essence of wind magic itself. A tight close-up focuses on Leo's eye, which begins to pulse with a chilling, lunar blue light as he grips his weapon. Leo then unleashes a devastating technique called wind break. Massive arcs of emerald energy explode outward in every direction, shredding the trees and any hidden threats within the immediate blast zone. Chelsea and Avid Lulin stand together in the shadows, their eyes tracking a low, horizontal green energy blade that schemes the ground. The sheer speed of the magical attack leaves a lingering trail of light in its wake. A final voice rings out with cold arrogance, declaring that attempting to lecture anyone on the nature of wind magic in the presence of the Lulin family is nothing short of ridiculous. Leo stands amidst the darkened trees, looking toward his captive with a clinical gaze. He admits that while the power Chelsea displayed was impressive, he tells her directly that she is fundamentally using it the wrong way. This blatant dismissal of her family's specialty sends Chelsea into a visible rage, her face flushing as she grits her teeth and begins to snap back, unable to believe his arrogance. However, before Chelsea can finish her outburst, Celia steps forward and raises a hand to physically bar her path. Celia's expression is one of sudden alertness, her eyes fixed on something in the distance as she commands everyone to wait and stop moving immediately. A heavy boot crunches down on the dry, brittle undergrowth of the forest of beasts as the group halts. Leo ignores the social tension and crouches low to the earth, his red eyes narrowing as he examines a grim discovery hidden among the roots. He points toward a pile of bleached, shattered bones that have been picked clean in a very specific, predatory manner. He informs Celia that he has seen this pattern of consumption before, identifying it as the work of a highly efficient and coordinated killer. This realization causes Leo's expression to sharpen into one of intense focus. He declares that he finally understands the true underlying condition required to pass this specific trial, realizing the unnatural silence of the forest was actually a warning. A violent pillar of crimson energy erupts from the ground without warning, shattering the earth and sending massive jagged rocks flying into the air. The sudden concussive force of the blast catches the group off guard, tearing through the tree line with lethal intensity. A hand reaches out desperately into the smoke as a nearby student is thrown backward by the shockwave, crying out in a brief, pained scream. Leo moves with blinding speed, lunging forward to catch the frightened peer before he can be impaled on the rising debris. He kneels on the cracked ground, shielding the trembling boy while Celia stands watch behind them, her silhouette framed by the lingering embers of the magical explosion. Polished shoes march rhythmically over the grass as a new figure emerges from the shadows of the ambush site. The figure is revealed to be a student in a sharp academy blazer, but his face carries a sinister, unsettling grin that reaches his glowing yellow eyes. He stares down at Leo and the others with a predatory confidence, showing no fear of the destruction or the casualties surrounding them. Suddenly, a blinding flash of white light bursts from the student's position, illuminating the entire clearing with a divine yet terrifying radiance. The surrounding forest is swallowed by the glare as a deafening roar echoes through the trees, signaling the arrival of a threat far greater than any standard monster. A piercing scream rings out as a close-up reveals a single, crimson eye glowing with a malevolent, incandescent light. Leo Plov immediately springs into action, his white hair whipping through the air as he executes a brutal, high-speed vertical slash. A massive surge of blue mana erupts from his movement, manifesting as a jagged energy wave that tears through the environment. The ground beneath the strike shatters instantly, sending a violent shockwave outward that kicks up thick clouds of dust and dark smoke across the battlefield, leaving the surrounding terrain scarred by the impact. Nearby students stand frozen in the misty woods, their spears held horizontally as they watch the clearing with expressions of pure bewilderment at the display of force. Chelsea Llewellyn sits on the ground in the foreground, looking up at the towering Leo with a face drained of color and her mouth slightly agape in shock. When Leo's gaze falls upon her, she can only offer a trembling, submissive response, stuttering out a desperate confirmation to his presence. Leo wastes no time on her fear, issuing a sharp command to attack quickly. A colossal, glowing scythe of blue energy hovers in the air behind them, its curved edge shimmering with lethal intent against the backdrop of the twisted forest trees. High-voltage blue electricity begins to surge across the surface of the magical construct, crackling with a distinct, sharp sound as it gathers power. The mana becomes increasingly unstable, with bolts of lightning jumping between the blades as the energy prepares to discharge into a full-scale offensive. The scene suddenly shifts into a frantic, blurred perspective of the forest floor, as if the camera is being propelled through the brush at an impossible velocity. The trees and foliage smear into a chaotic mess of motion, punctuated only by a sharp gasp of air that signals the immense physical strain and speed of the ongoing encounter. A brilliant, white-hot radiance suddenly floods the area, obscuring the entire landscape in a blinding flash of light that signals a moment of peak desperation. A dialogue bubble cuts through the glare, carrying a frantic vow from a participant who refuses to be defeated in such a humiliating manner. A student with bright red hair is shown in a tight profile, his face covered in beads of sweat and his jaw clenched in an expression of sheer panic. From a distance, Celia Zerdinger observes the unfolding crisis, her red eyes narrowing as she identifies the fleeing individual, realizing with a start that the person caught in the chaos is someone she recognizes. Heavy footsteps echo through the thick, swirling mist of the forest of beasts as silhouettes move through the gloom. Avid Llewellyn and Celia Zerdinger stand side by side amidst the haze, their gazes fixed on a figure emerging from the trees. Chelsea Llewellyn rushes forward with a look of pure desperation, her wavy blue hair flowing as she cries out for her brother. Avid meets her with a dignified posture, reassuring her that she is finally safe from her captor. Celia watches the reunion with a sharp, narrow gaze, acknowledging the return of the Llewellyn heir. Leo Plov casually runs a hand through his spiky white hair, a relaxed smile on his face as he addresses the gathered students. He nonchalantly explains that he merely suggested a path of cooperation to Chelsea during their time together. The atmosphere takes a sudden, dark turn as Leo's face is cast in deep shadow, leaving only his glowing red eyes and a predatory grin visible. He adds with chilling confidence that he simply persuaded her well, leaving the true nature of his persuasion hanging heavily in the air. Leo shifts his focus to a frightened student with short purple hair, placing a firm, commanding hand on the boy's trembling shoulder. The student hunches over in sheer terror, unable to meet the protagonist's gaze as Leo prepares to move the group forward. Chelsea is visibly incensed by this display of leadership, her face contorting with confusion and indignation. She barks out a question, demanding to know why Leo is bothering to help these weaker individuals when they serve no apparent purpose to their primary goals. On the blood-stained forest floor, a student in a green blazer kneels to check on a fallen peer as Leo declares that certain old hierarchies are no longer necessary. He stands with his back to the carnage, looking toward the horizon with a cold, unwavering resolve. As he speaks of conquering the immediate challenges, the idea of conquering the world itself hangs in the air. Leo's expression remains stoic and focused, his red eyes reflecting a level of ambition that far exceeds the scope of a mere academy trial. Chelsea and Celia look on in stunned silence, beads of sweat rolling down their faces as they witness Leo's absolute authority over the situation. A heavy boot steps down onto the dark, stained earth, but instead of the expected sound of forest floor, the ground shatters with a dry, brittle crack. The soil beneath them is unnaturally parched and devoid of life. Leo looks down at the crumbling terrain, noting that it feels as if every drop of moisture has been violently drained from the land, leaving nothing but a withered wasteland in their wake. Leo stands among the towering, shadowed trees of the forest of beasts alongside Celia and a trembling student. An outstretched hand gestures toward the eerie stillness as a voice questions why, for a place known for its lethality, there are so few monsters currently present. Celia's eyes widen in immediate alarm, her head snapping to the side as she detects a sudden, sharp sound cutting through the unnatural silence of the woods. 3 jagged, glowing red slits pierce the absolute darkness of the dense foliage nearby. These predatory eyes pulse with a malevolent light, signaling the presence of a creature far beyond the standard difficulty level of the Academy trial. A realization is revealed that Hero Albi's legendary first achievement was the subjugation of a higher-ranked monster, suggesting that a similar high-level threat has now manifested before the current group. The group remains tensed in a tight formation as the atmosphere grows heavy with the weight of impending violence. Leo's red eye narrows in a sharp close-up, focusing intensely on the source of chilling, rhythmic screams that begin to echo through the undergrowth. He stands firmly in the center of a wide clearing as mystical red energy ribbons swirl around the terrain, marking the arrival of a massive, overwhelming power. A heavy purple aura descends upon Leo, Celia, and their companions, signaling the activation of a concentrated magical field. Leo remains composed as he observes the escalation, stating flatly that the true enemy seems to have finally shown itself. Overhead, swarms of bats erupt from the canopy in a panicked flight while more glowing eyes manifest within the brush, accompanied by the heavy, rhythmic thumping of a massive entity stepping out from the shadows. The focus shifts to a dark, brewing resolve as a voice internally declares that somehow, no matter the cost, they will eliminate Leo. This vow of vengeance hangs in the air just as a final, heavy sound resonates against the damp, dark earth. A single, ominous, tuck echoes through the void, marking the exact moment the high-level beast makes contact with the ground, leaving the group's survival uncertain as the encounter begins. A dark, ominous void consumes the screen as panicked screams of "AAGH" and "What is this?" erupt from the shadows. The previous heavy, tuck sound is immediately followed by a thick, viscous liquid dripping through the air with a sickening, jinduk sound effect. In a close-up, a hand belonging to a student is suddenly struck by a single, large droplet of this mysterious white substance. The student freezes, looking down at his hand in total confusion as he utters a faint, "huh," while the liquid begins to coat his skin. A wide, golden eye with a spiraling iris stares upward in terror as the slime continues to rain down from above. Sound effects "ttuduk" and "duru" highlight the heavy, constant dripping that now splashes directly onto the student's face and eyes. A massive moon hangs in the background as jagged red text slices across the frame, signaling a shift in the atmosphere. The silhouette of a student, likely avid Llewellyn, is seen slumped on the ground, completely dwarfed by the towering, spindly legs of a massive creature that looms over him. This chilling encounter in the forest of beasts concludes as the screen transitions through the series title card, moving away from the dark woods. The scene shifts abruptly to the bright, grand architecture of the academy, where the sun shines through large glass windows. Within a massive lecture hall, dozens of students are gathered, watching a giant magical screen that displays live footage of the ongoing trial in the forest. A student with reddish hair gestures to himself with a smug, arrogant grin, boasting to his peer that he has already taken care of 15 or 16 targets. He stands with confidence, clearly believing his performance is elite compared to the rest of the class, unaware of the true scale of the trial. Professor Albi, sporting his signature blonde hair and dark circular sunglasses, stares coldly at the boasting student as he reveals his own tally of about 500. The student's pride vanishes instantly as Albi stands behind a wooden podium, his expression unreadable behind his shades. An academy official leans in close to the microphone, desperately arguing that Albi must select at least 100 passing students to match the quotas of the other regions. Professor Albi remains entirely unmoved by the plea, reaching up to adjust his sunglasses with a chillingly calm demeanor. He declares with absolute authority that if the candidates do not meet his specific standards, he is perfectly willing to fail every single one of them. A caption appears over Leo and a trembling student, stating that a real hero can only be found in difficult times. They stand together in the dim light of the forest of beasts as a massive, voyeuristic eye looms in the sky above them, watching their every move. The narrative poses a chilling question, asking if Leo can truly beat this world, as the weight of his legendary past remains hidden from his peers. Rapid movement echoes through the dense, purple-hued woods as the students navigate the treacherous and uneven terrain. The frightened, purple-haired student stops to look around the oppressive shadows, cursing under his breath that the environment has become pitch black. The atmosphere grows heavy with the sound of rustling leaves and the sense of an approaching presence as the group pushes further into the darkness. A sinister red glow begins to emanate from the darkness ahead, accompanied by a sharp, grinding sound that vibrates through the air. Celia Zerdinger narrows her eyes at the pulsating crimson aura, shouting a sudden warning to the group that there is something dangerous positioned directly up ahead. She commands everyone to get ready as a surge of red energy swirls violently into a vortex, and the sharp blade is drawn to meet the impending threat. A colossal, muscular shadow with glowing red eyes and tattered remains rises from the abyss, completely dwarfing the students. The monster radiates a terrifying, high-level pressure that causes Celia and Avid Lulin to recoil in visible shock and sweat. Celia gasps in disbelief, asking what kind of monster they have encountered, while Avid stares at the entity, realizing they are facing the one threat that shouldn't exist here. Chelsea Lulin steps forward, her blue hair whipping in the wind as she unleashes a concentrated magical strike toward the giant. She begins to chant Wind P-, summoning a fierce torrent of teal energy from her staff to hold back the encroaching beast. Leo Plov stands firmly behind her, watching as Chelsea groans his name in desperation, her physical strength failing under the monster's overwhelming power. Her hand trembles violently as she clutches her glowing magic stones, which begin to crack and shatter with a sharp sound against the impossible strain of the battle. A jagged bolt of golden magical energy tears through the dark purple sky, illuminating the twisted branches of the forest of beasts. Leo Plov stands firmly on the ground next to a visibly shaken Chelsea, both of them observing the escalating mana density of the trial. Avid Lulin suddenly makes his presence known, standing tall with a look of cold determination as he clutches his ornate magical staff. A massive, swirling vortex of teal mana erupts around his body, spiraling upward with intense velocity as he prepares to engage the encroaching threats. Avid lunges forward, slamming his staff into a skeletal monster with a deafening burst of teal light. The force of the magical impact is absolute, sending the creature's limbs flying in every direction as it is blasted backward through the undergrowth. A detailed view shows the thick, dark carapace of the monster splitting apart under the pressure of the strike. Intense green energy leaks from the fissures in its shell, signaling the complete destruction of its physical form as the creature begins to disintegrate into the air. Celia Zerdinger, Chelsea, and another terrified student freeze in place as a massive, piercing screech rips through the silence of the woods. Their eyes are wide with shock as they stare upward at a terrifying sight descending from the purple-hued heavens. The spider princess, Tarantulia, emerges from a swirl of clouds and magical residue. It is a gargantuan arachnid with dozens of hairy limbs, a bloated abdomen marked with heart shapes, and a mouth full of jagged, razor-sharp teeth that snap in anticipation of a kill. Avid Lulin charges toward the massive spider while the other students recoil in terror. He identifies the creature as the spider princess, Tarantulia, and shouts for the beast to eat his attack as he throws himself into a desperate charge. A dark figure moves with blinding speed, delivering a heavy, sweeping blow that carves through the air with a sharp sound effect. The sheer momentum of the physical strike creates a visual blur across the frame, showing the lethal force being applied to halt the spider's descent. Celia Zerdinger steps into the center of the clearing with her red eyes glowing with killing intent. She states that she will finish the encounter in a single blow, raising her weapon as a catastrophic aura of heat and light begins to coalesce around her. With a fierce cry, she activates her ultimate technique, shouting, "Prominence," as a colossal wave of fire incinerates the entire battlefield. The spider princess lets out a final, agonizing screech of "Kie," before its massive form is completely dissolved by the overwhelming flames. Celia stares upward in shock as the multi-eyed silhouette of Tartaros looms over her. She acknowledges that the difference in destructive power between a knight and a mage is like day and night. High above the forest canopy, Chelsea levitates with her magical staff, her hair fluttering in the surging mana. Celia watches from below, sweat beading on her face as she witnesses the scale of the upcoming attack. Chelsea centers her focus and initiates her high-level spell, Rafali. Chelsea smiles with confidence as emerald energy erupts from her weapon. The mana coalesces into dozens of sharp, glowing projectiles that spiral into a lethal vortex. From her aerial vantage point, she unleashes a massive cyclone of wind blades that descend toward the earth. Avid looks up in stunned silence, shouting, "Ah!" as the blinding light fills the battlefield. The magical storm slams into Tartaros, shredding through its hide with overwhelming force as the energy blades tear into the monster's flesh. Celia Zerdinger stands beneath a glowing full moon, her white and gold uniform shimmering in the forest darkness. She grips her spear with both hands as sharp wind blades slice through the air around her. Her expression is locked in a state of intense focus, her long hair billowing as she stabilizes her breathing amidst the escalating chaos of the trial. A close-up reveals Celia's eyes widening as a massive, multi-legged beast lunges from the canopy above. The creature bares its jagged fangs, diving with lethal intent toward Avid Lulin. Avid stands paralyzed in the clearing, staring up in shock as the monster's shadow completely envelopes him, leaving him unable to react to the sudden, predatory strike. Chelsea Llewellyn sprints into view with her staff raised, her eyes wide with desperation. She screams, "Brother, Windbreaker," as she thrusts her hand forward to manifest her magic. A brilliant teal crescent of energy erupts from her palm, cutting through the darkness to shield Avid from the monster's descent. Chelsea strains as her teal magical barrier deflects a heavy blow, her face etched with panic. She rushes to Avid's side while the lingering energy of the Windbreaker dissipates into the dark forest air. Trembling, she looks up at her brother and asks if he is okay. Avid pushes himself off the ground and offers a terse thanks to Chelsea for the rescue. He stares ahead with wide, sweat-beaded eyes, breathless as he asks what kind of monster they are facing. The sight of the creature's wounds sealing instantly leaves him paralyzed, forcing him to shout in disbelief at its monstrous regeneration. Celia and the remaining students stand frozen as the massive entity looms over them with overwhelming pressure. The beast, Tartaros, lets out a piercing, high-pitched screech that vibrates through the clearing. Its multiple red eyes glow with predatory hunger as it opens its massive maw, bearing jagged fangs toward the group. Leo gazes upward with a calm expression while identifying the massive beast. He recognizes the creature as the daughter of Salatna and the queen of Tartaros. This monster was a key part of Erebos' army, the force responsible for raising the elf forest. A panicked student screams the name, Tartaros, as the true level of the threat becomes clear. Celia and the Llewellyn siblings stand frozen by the monster's overwhelming pressure. Leo observes the group while noting that the mana within Albi's left eye was undeniably the Fairy King's mana. He narrows his red eyes, focusing on the connection between the beast and the ancient king. A jagged memory fragment reveals the colossal spider-like entity known as Tarantula. She ruled the cursed wild forest through total slaughter. The flashback shows her destroying the home of the elves and consuming the Fairy King's right hand during their final struggle against her. The monster's massive purple maw opens wide to reveal rows of jagged teeth as a realization surfaces regarding its survival. While it was believed the hero Luna had slain Tarantulia, the beast survived by consuming the Fairy King's right hand. This divine catalyst served as a life-preserving force within its stomach. A pale, severed hand appears in a vision, bearing a glowing golden band known as the Ring of Life. This artifact is the source of infinite life energy that fuels the creature's monstrous regeneration. The ring pulses with a vibrant green light, granting the beast near immortality. Avid Llewellyn grips his glowing scepter, declaring that he will defeat the monster if it is the key to passing the test. Celia Zerdinger immediately challenges him, shouting her defiance before they both charge. The rivals launch a simultaneous explosion of teal magic and crimson sword strikes against the towering enemy. Crimson and teal magical impacts explode against the monster's thick hide. The devastating strikes hit home, but the beast's purple flesh knits back together instantly. A voice warns that the creature will simply continue regenerating regardless of how many times it is struck. Leo and Chelsea stand back while Celia looks on with a strained, sweating expression. A voice declares that the fighting will continue until the students eventually run out of mana. Nearby, a glowing green beetle skitters through the dark grass, its shell pulsating with an eerie light. Celia turns to Avid and asks for his suggestion, suggesting that they must work together. Avid flatly refuses, declaring his intent to be the top scorer alone. Celia immediately snaps back that the title will belong to her. Leo stares ahead, noting that if they cannot overcome this, they cannot beat the hero's world. Leo stares ahead with cold intensity, stating that if they cannot overcome the hero's world, everyone will fail. His words cause Celia and Avid to freeze in place, their faces etched with sudden tension as the weight of the trial sinks in. Avid grips his magical staff tightly, sweat rolling down his face as he admits that even working together, they need time to prepare a killing blow. He notes that only he and Celia possess the power to stall the beast long enough, leaving Celia staring ahead in grim silence. Leo steps forward with a confident smirk, declaring he will be the one to do it. Celia turns toward him in disbelief, shouting that his plan is suicide. She reminds him that he cannot even use aura to defend himself against the massive threat. Leo walks steadily toward the monster as Celia shouts that his plan is suicide, reminding him he cannot even use aura. Leo calmly admits he only needs to buy 5 minutes of time. Watching from the side, Chelsea trembles with a worried expression, internally wondering what will happen if their final attack fails. Leo glances back with a sharp smirk while continuing his march into the battlefield. His boots step past a heavy, discarded battle axe lying among the debris. He dismisses Chelsea's fears, stating that failure simply will not happen as he approaches the center of the conflict. Light beams through the canopy as Leo remarks that fire and wind have always been good friends. He looks forward with absolute confidence, noting that the two elements work perfectly in unison. Avid stands near Celia, watching in stunned silence as Leo steps past them to face the massive threat head-on. Celia and Avid stand paralyzed as a sudden surge of mana erupts before them. They turn their heads in unison, eyes widening in shock at the sheer pressure suddenly filling the clearing. Leo leaps high into the air, a massive arc of blue energy trailing his rapid descent. He brings his power crashing down with a heavy strike directly into the gaping maw of Tartaros. The impact creates a violent explosion of blue light against the creature's jagged fangs while Leo lands with absolute precision. Leo looks back over his shoulder with a sharp, confident smirk, his red eyes glowing with intensity. He stares down the massive entity while identifying it simply as the monster of Tartaros.